Welcome, Dungeon Plunger Union members. I have my +1 plunger, a cup of coffee flavored holy water, and a very special Union member with me today to help plunge the dungeon and flush evil down the drain. Our guest today hails from the UK and has written for Paranoia, Night's Black Agents, Symbaroum, and a bunch of other stuff. Also, the creative and driving force behind Just Crunch Games, author of Sanction, Desanction, Cthulhu Hack, and, of course, the forthcoming Cork Bord RPG, currently on Kickstarter. Welcome to the show, Paul Baldowski.
It's good to be here, Jason. Thank you for inviting me.
Ah, the pleasure is all mine. I am super stoked to have you here. Like I was saying off recording, I stumbled upon Corkboard by accident, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, I need to talk to Paul. This looks so cool. But before we get into that,
Hmm.
I I just wanted to like kind of get to know you a little bit and kind of talk a little bit about, some of your writing history and stuff like that and your like, time in the RPG scene. So could you just tell us a little bit about yourself for people who might not know and how you got into the RPG scene?
So I mean, broadly, I got into role playing as a way of avoiding school breaks in the outdoors. I managed to get myself into a school brass band who had practice rooms where we ended up playing games of D&D and Middle-earth role playing and Call of Cthulhu and all manner of other games. And that was from like 12. So, and it was just a really good excuse to hide away from the rain and the bad weather. Um, but I then just became kind of fascinated by reading these games. I think even then, this is all the way back in the sort of mid 80s, late 80s. I think I was fascinated by both the games themselves, but also the mechanical side of it. Because before I'd left school, I was already writing games and running play-by-mails in the old days when pieces of paper would go back and forth between like-minded people who were willing to play in one of the worlds I created. So even then, I was creating my own materials. Um, but then I kind of fell out of doing that in the 90s. Um, um, and then in the early noughties, um, I got involved with I got involved on the periphery of a forum called Paranoia.net, I think it was. But more importantly, I fell in to the occasional conversation with Alan Varney, who had written for the earliest sort of versions of Paranoia, and had been bought on by Mongoose Publishing to produce the new a new edition. And I first of all got involved with a free-form game that he created called the Toothpaste Disaster, which involved an array of high programmers trying to outdo each other by posting up various reports relating to something called the toothpaste disaster, which was completely undefined. But week by week, we would create content alphabetically, as I recall it. So starting with A and working through to Z. And yeah, we over the course of half a year, we just we created this toothpaste disaster. But out of that um, storytelling, that piece of sort of narrative work that we did there, Alan recruited what became known as the Traitor Recycling Studio, which were a little bullpen of writers who were there to be able to support him in creating the new range for Paranoia XP, as it was then before Microsoft got involved and whipped the XP away. And so I am loosely responsible for about 25 pages of the Paranoia XP rulebook. And but then I got involved with writing adventures. So starting off with Crash Priority, which was one of the earliest adventures, and also some material for the GM screen, which came with a mission blender, which allowed you to randomly create missions. And then Alan was kind enough to, after I'd pitched it, to allow me to write my own supplement called the Underplex, which effectively riffed off one of the early supplements and ideas that came with the original Paranoia about a kind of dungeons underneath Alpha Complex. In that instance, it was kind of like a weird mashup, dimensional crossover with like D&D, with a wizard finding his way into Alpha Complex. But in the Underplex, it explored it more openly as effectively a dumping ground and a hideaway that existed beneath the ground. Alpha Complex itself already beneath the ground. This was the beneath. Um, and yeah, so from then, I kind of then just got into the business of sort of being a freelance. So as you mentioned, like Night's Black Agents, I wrote um, most of Italy for the in the director's handbook, for example, and had the pleasure of working with Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan and Kenneth Hite. And I wrote for Maelstrom, which was a historical game, which I had played in my youth, and was that was republished, and so I had the opportunity to write for that. But then since then, yeah, I've then written for all sorts of things, including, and I spy it behind you on the shelf, as you noted, Symbaroum. I can see
Hmm.
it. I can see.
Yep.
And yes, I've written various little bits and pieces for the likes of Symbaroum as well, um, and had great fun getting into the mythology of that game.
So, what was the experience like working with Kenneth and Gareth? Because I imagine that must have been pretty crazy, like two high profile designers.
Gar is just a really nice person. Always has been. Ken is a really nice person. Ken how I think had a really clear vision of what he did or didn't want. And so it meant a couple of back and forths. I think I wrote I was originally brought on to write the enigmatic Monsignor, which was just like a few hundred words for an NPC. But having written that character, Ken and or Gar must have had other bits that they needed doing and thought, okay, he can probably handle it. So I did like the observatory on Vesuvius and Naples and other parts of basically Italy, which were involved in the campaign. And it was just, I probably from my point of view, actually, it was just a nice experience. I knew Gar from the reason I guess I've been brought on board because he took over from Alan Varney for Paranoia. As effectively, he used to be kind of the in-house writer who produced a whole pile of D20 content during the noughties when that was the thing that you made your money doing, sort of using the open license for the system to create all sorts of things. And so he had been brought on to take over Paranoia, and therefore he was aware of my involvement as part of the Traitor Recycling Studio. And so I came on board, did the NPC, and then Ken, I guess, and he must have decided, yeah, this seems good. So went from there. But yeah, Ken's great. I've since met him many times. Had the pleasure of selling him some of my games.
Oh, that's cool.
And also playing games occasionally and attending lectures, seminars at the Kraken Gaming Convention in Germany, which is a really nice sort of face-to-face gathering of like about 90 to 100 people in a Schloss in Germany, where you get to sort of sit down and just literally you just you're having lunch and dinner and breakfast with game designers who otherwise you only have you only read their stuff normally, and this is your opportunity to sort of literally just sit down and have breakfast with them. And really nice. He's a really nice guy.
That is so cool. I imagine the feeling of having somebody like Kenneth Hite, buy your stuff, has got to be like, um, you know, a notch on your belt, or something that you'd put a plaque up in your office like Kenneth Hite bought my stuff.
Well, I mean, he is obviously a voracious collector. I mean, so he bought Cthulhu Hack, and I think he is also. I have ta sort of pitched to him the idea of him writing for material for desanction. So, but equally, it was, for example, the involvement of the involvement with the Dracula dossier and Gareth and Ken that my wife runs a company called All Rolled Up that makes accessories and gaming accessories, and it was that involvement as well that got her a gold Ennie in the 2016 Ennie Awards. So it was a great project to be involved with, and it really nice to work with people who, I mean, obviously Gar's gone on to an insanely successful career as a writer now, as well as doing gaming stuff. And Ken continues to create some wonderful material himself. So it was nice to be involved with them so early on.
Yeah, that's really cool. How did you get connected to Symbaroum then? So like I understand like the connection from Paranoia and Night's Black Agents, but what was the like, did you just submit to Free League for that, or did you have an inside connection as well?
So I got involved with Symbaroum before Free League, when it was still published by Yarnringen. In late 2015, having success, published it and had some success in their home ground, Yarnringen decided to crowdfund a translation. And so I got on board at that early stage and I think I just got the PDF at the time of Symbaroum, and I fell in love with the art, and got the PDF and um, picked up the translation. I think once it had been once it had been published, it came through Modifius here in the UK. And yeah, I fell sufficiently in love that I even went to the extent of picking up, for example, the Advanced Player's Guide when it was still untranslated, because it was taking time I was so interested in it. The Advanced Player's Guide has got like the dwarf and the undead character types in it and stuff, and they just sounded fascinating. So I was picking this material up, and I started writing a blog called The Iron Pact. And then over the course of pretty much 2016 to maybe 2018, I wrote, I'm going to take a stab at like 150,000 words of articles, adventures, creatures, new abilities, ideas about running the game. And as a result, I think, especially during that 2016 period, I guess what I was writing attracted the attention of essentially being able to write a game. They were going through the process of trying to increase the popularity and availability of the game, and it was being there was a benefit to having blogs like this sort of expand that exposure, because this was still before Free League. And I met Matthias Johnson at Gen Con as well, because he had read my stuff, and I think we had some discussions. Actually, that would have been in 2000, and yeah, it would have been in 2016, I think. And yeah, it's just from there, having spoken to him and show, I think clearly shown my enthusiasm for the setting and the material that I was producing, I was invited to write adventures. So when they were finally kind of they were picked up by Free League because there's a connection in the background in terms of the games that were produced and the people involved. And they were doing crowdfunding for one of the early parts of the Throne of Thorns, and they did when they did Indorus, the capital city of Ambria. They needed adventures, so I wrote two adventures for the city adventure book, and I also wrote two adventures either for the previous or the next campaign, which were based in the Raven Mountains, and also wrote some material for the bestiary. So I did like there's a creature called the Glimmer, which is basically an echo of the emotions from battlefields that has taken physical form, and a creature, uh, the name of which I've now forgotten, which uh, nests in the unconscious trolls when they are basically when they're sleeping. It inserts itself in beneath their flesh and drives them mad, rather like parasitic wasps and do in our world. A spite is what it was called. And anyway, so I just had a great. It was just having conversations with Matthias, and also in that there's a really nice community around Symbaroum as well. And then producing all this material, just yeah, I just really loved the setting and getting involved with it.
That's really cool. I've always found, I don't know about what you think, maybe I'm off base on this, but I found that there was like a similar sort of vibe between Symbaroum and Forbidden Lands in the sense that like you had this population that was sort of displaced and then went to go explore this area beyond a wall, kind of, in the case of Symbaroum,
Mm,
it's like this forest, whereas in like Forbidden Lands, depending on which, if you're using the original box, it's sort of like this, hexed off area,
yeah.
beyond the mountains kind of thing. Do you think that there's a connection there, or do you think I'm just being too
I I would say actually there's quite a strong sort of is the right word cultural sort of there's a tone driven by the sort of Swedish heritage there, of certain landscapes and nature, the
mm,
nature of people and discovery and exploration and forests and maybe also there's almost inevitably, although this is pure guesswork at this point, that there's going to be some crossover in gaming groups. You know,
right?
you will have people who game with each other, even if in passing, or there is that cross-pollination of ideas that leads to this kind of a crossover, which might be almost unintentional. Weirdly and completely at a tangent. Watching, for example, Foundation at the moment, I just keep repeatedly see like this crossover with Dune, and clearly that
Mm,
when writers cross each other's paths and have a connection, and they do things at a certain point in time, ideas kind of leak through, and they yeah, it's one of those things that you will find that people will chance upon similar ideas, have similar I don't know what the triggers are. I mean, we're going back to Ken Hite here. A good example would be, for example, my game, The Desanction, which is an Elizabethan historical investigation game, which I started developing very late 2013, early 2014. I'd just started putting down some ideas. I'd got a couple of adventures together, and I was sort of looking to run them at exactly the same time. Ken Hite released The School of Night, which is a short supplement for the Gumshoe system
mm,
about investigating the world of Elizabethan the landscape with John Dee and so forth in the
right.
in the backdrop and also and I have no idea why we simultaneously had almost exactly the same idea. Luckily, I weathered the sense of self-doubt about whether to progress with it at that point. Ken's covered it. Why should
Right.
I carry on? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just one of those things. I know, little triggers, little influences that catch people at the same time, and they
Hmm.
they end up with something that clearly has a certain amount of crossover. But these things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to happen a lot in creative works. You see it like with movies coming out all the time about the same sort of themes,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you're like, that's weird. So,
Yes, yeah.
so how did you make the leap from freelancing to starting your own company, Just Crunch Games?
So I had probably tinkered with the odd small supplement here and there. I had, created like little adventures and nothing particularly serious, or with any high expectations. That I think they're still simmering around on drive through, in one shape or form. But in 2016, which seems to be a very important year in many ways for some reason, um, David Black released the Black Hack,
Okay.
which was one of those games that caught attention and interest, and it was, a very simple, dark sort of uh, approach to dungeoneering, during a period when lots of people were coming up with little games and ideas, and it had an open license to it as well. So you could have, and there was a bare bones version of it produced as well. So you could literally just take the bare bones version and build off it. And I think, and I referenced this at the beginning when I was talking about my Play by Mail games, there's just something in my head that means when I get a game, I don't necessarily, the first thing I do is not necessarily run to a table to play it. I will, I will dismantle it.
Mm.
There is something in my head which will go, I will work through the mechanics and I will think them through. And in the process of kind of grasping the game and its nuances and what makes it tick, I will, yeah, I will just step through it, and I will often come away with ideas of my own. And in this instance, the Black Cat uses something called a usage die, which was a
Hmm.
way of tracking supplies and resources without really tracking them in a more sort of ad hoc way, which effectively almost introduced a kind of, probably an extreme way of saying it, kind of like a fog of war to the way you use your personal resources, in that you can go in one end and not really know when you get to the end of a battle or the end of a dungeon, whether you're going to still have arrows or whether you're
Hmm.
going to have enough torches or whatever. And it was just a way to track gear without the finicky business of being precise, but at the same time, kind of introducing a kind of compelling tension. And I saw that mechanic, and for some reason, and this is always a challenge when I talk to other people, I don't know why sanity, or the sort of the, the decline of investigators in the Cthulhu setting, somehow just hit me as I could use that usage die to track sanity. But then I took it a step further and thought, actually, if we break that out a bit further, if you look at a Lovecraftian story, it's not, they don't just go mad. There's a kind of, there's a slow realization as the investigator, the person, the narrator, or the focus of the story progresses, of things not of this world, things that just don't make sense, just coming to them in the process of them looking further and further at it. And so I realized that could be a really cool approach. Effectively, Cthulhu Hack is bedded in the idea that your investigative skills are a way to advance through the each story, but at the same time, you have the challenge that you might break physically,
Mm.
mentally. Your hit points might decline, so to speak, but your investigative skills become clouded. Your ability to deal with people become troubled because you doubt them or you doubt the nature of your existence.
Mm,
The more you get involved with this cosmic horror, the less you feel certain about who you are, and actually begin to question things that happened in your past. So the notion is that in Cthulhu Hack, you ask to, you go into a room, you search for a clue, the GM tells you about the clue, but then you make a roll afterwards to see whether that piece of information brings about a revelation about something closer, uncomfortably close to you. And if you roll a one or two on a die, basically, that revelation hits and hits hard to the extent that your ability drops down a die. And as the game goes on, your dice drop further and further till eventually they reach a D4. And when you roll a one or two on a D4, you have a literal break. You have to
mm.
step away because you have now your discoveries have just damaged your perception or your view of the world around you to the extent you can no longer handle it. And so that yeah, I within 3 months of Black Cat coming out, I'd written the first version of Cthulhu Hack and had run some playtests at local cons and published it. And that was my first step on something I'd written myself for myself, being picked up by tons of people. At the time, I think I was. It's never happened again. I think I was like number one on drive through for like a week after it
Wow,
went out.
that's special.
Um, yeah, as I said, never happened again. But yeah, it was fascinating. I was on holiday at the time, and and I was just like, I'm still there. I'm still on top. People are buying it. And yeah, so that was my first step into doing my own stuff.
That is really cool. I actually feel like that's a great, jumping point to get into talking about corkboard because I get a sense with your work that there's this underlying theme of like sort of investigative, role playing. Would that
Hmm.
be is sanction and desanction there are they like investigative or is it more of like exploring that because I think sanction is more of like a I'd looked it up a little bit before just to kind of but now I'm drawing a blank.
Sanction is a generic game, kind of. So I mentioned briefly desanction in relation to Ken Hite and his
Right.
attempt to derail me by publishing The School of Night. And part of the issue I had actually was I hadn't come up with a rule system for the
Mm,
desanction. So I ran adventures pretty much without a system or with a version of a system that
interesting.
got discarded. And when I finally came up with a system, it was like 6, 7 years later.
Really? Okay.
And so I came up with this system. I wrote the system separately. I bolted desanction on top of it. And after the success of desanction, when I crowdfunded it, I found people were actually using the rules, which were relatively straightforward and almost like another spin-off, like a step further away from Cthulhu Hack. It still had kind of a usage die-ish mechanic, but you don't decline in the same way. It was like I was just that's good. Let's try it a different way. As I said, it's like getting a game and immediately wanting to rip it apart. I kind of do it with my own stuff as well. So
Right.
desanction was that. And so sanction is more a generic game. Desanction is investigative, as is Cthulhu Hack. I think where this comes from is I do not, and I'm not saying you can't do investigative games in D&D, but my path in role playing has never been through dungeoneering,
Right.
or where it's obviously D&D, Pathfinder, and so forth are not no longer really about dungeoneering, but back in the 70s and 80s when I was playing, that was what it was. You might have the Caves of Chaos or something, but that was just a dungeon in a natural setting or whatever.
Hmm.
And so I never did that. Go to the next room, check the door, beat something up. I was playing Call of Cthulhu. I was playing Star Trek. I was playing Warhammer. And while Warhammer, is it's kind of, it's an investigative game as well, even though it came from a heritage of, a war game. The Warhammer Fantasy game is definitely more investigative. So I think that's what I was used to, and
Mm,
maybe as a result, that's where my sort of the spine of my gaming, it lies. So whenever I come back to doing the game. I like to challenge myself, but I don't think I've quite got to the stage where I'm quite ready to go out on such a distant limb to do something that doesn't feel like I've been, bedded in understanding it from my own gaming experience.
right.
So yeah, so Kirk Bird is yeah, it is. I guess it's a little odd in that, I'll come up with some more random pronunciations here, basing it off Mork Borg.
I say Mork Borg, but I joke because I feel like this is why Free League won't let me interview them because I keep saying Mork Borg wrong, and they're like, "Listen, once you figure out how to say it, then maybe we'll talk."
Yeah, Mork Borg is clearly, it's dungeoneering again. It's definitely of that ilk. Um, but it's another case of me finding a game and thinking, what could I do with that? What could I do with it? Which would be, different. And so, yes, I have put an investigative twist on top of it, driven by my love of Nordic noir, um, police procedural books and TV. And that has been um, it's been lurking in the back of my mind for a year. Um, and I finally had that moment where I needed to get it on paper.
Was it Mork Borg or Merkborg uh that inspired it, and then you came up with the idea for the investigation, or was it like I want to do Nordic noir, and this is like the perfect system to like adapt was for it?
I think I would probably be lying if I didn't say it was down to the pun of the name.
Okay.
Um, but at the same time, so yeah, Kirkbird clearly is riffs off several notions. So it's two four-letter words which mirror Merkbore, no, obviously not in pronunciation. It is a reference to cork boards, which are make a common appearance in police procedurals, where you have that wall covered with random pieces of paper and evidence. And the actual logo itself has, because it's bedded in noir. I keep looking over because it's here and I'm just reminding myself. Uh, um, because it was bedded in Nordic noir, which covers like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Iceland. It covers it has expanded really, I guess, to cover all those countries. Um, th yeah, I got the little dots over the O of Cork. Um, the slash through the O comes from the fact that there are pins and string in the logo, and that was unintentional. I think I'd originally planned just to have an O, but then I was designing the logo, and I thought that would be cool. And then I have quite rightly been taken aside by some of the Swedish individuals who have come across the game or who already sort of support my other games, who've quite rightly told me that that letter does not exist in the Swedish language. It
Oh,
is
really?
Norwegian, Finnish, Danish, and O with a slash through it. Yes, not in Swedish. So it is a bit of a hodgepodge in terms of, it also doesn't mean anything. Um, I was really conscious. I'm conscious that sometimes overenthusiastic people publish games only to later be told that if you put them in a translator, it means something desperately rude in like Korean or or whatever. Yeah, in the Ukrainian, that's the worst possible word you could ever say. But yeah, I ran it, I popped it in the translator, and notionally it doesn't mean anything. So, but as I said, it had enough connections with what I wanted to do, and that connection to McBory that yeah, I stuck with it. And I think really, oddly enough, I had picked up the yellow and black book in quite a while ago because it just kind of I have much like yourself have a fine library of many books, and I'm fascinated by these all sorts of new games. Mork Borg is kind of driven by the fact it has this fascinating grimdark setting, this art which is the centerpiece of it, very much in the ilk of like Symbaroum, where the art in Symbaroum caught my eye. It Mokbore almost means to drive a nail into your eye with the art, but it is a just a massively simple game. The rules fit in on the fly, the end papers. It just caught my eye, and I hadn't tried to do a mashup with it before, and so yeah, the challenge was on, and as I said, I had the idea I, early last year, and I'd been tinkering with it. I had, I don't know whether the pun of Kirkbird actually hit me first, or whether I'd thought about doing investigation in Mokbore, and it's another one of those things that without a time machine, I can't work out which was which. But yeah, I came up with it. Came up with the front cover last year, which is another bad habit of mine. I have an idea, I make a cover. The game turns up sometime later. And yeah, so I then tinkered with the idea over the course of a year. And I have finally now uh, put myself under the pressure of actually, yeah, crowdfunding its publication because it needs to be sort of art rich, or at least have. I need to invest a lot of let time in layout and acquisition of art in some way, shape, or form. But because it's very much real world, it's going to have lots of real world imagery in it. But I suspect it will also have some various contributions from some of the artists that I have the pleasure of working with in the past.
Well, it's certainly as soon as I saw the image and your advertisement in Kickstarter as I was scrolling along, I was like, holy crap. I'm like, I can't believe that nobody's ever thought about doing like a Nordic noir investigation game before. I mean, I feel like I mean, obviously Call of Cthulhu is like a heavy hitter in terms of, investigative RPGs and, I'm sure there's other ones out there, but to me, I was like, this really gives a flavor, combined with Mork Borg to really produce something unique in the field. So that was what really attracted to me to it. And then kind of going along, okay, so one of the things that jumped out was you talk about using this clue chain system. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that works and um, because to me it felt kind of like a unique kind of concept in terms of investigations. And I also feel like investigations and mysteries are one of those things that a lot of people find challenging to run in RPGs. So maybe if you could speak a little bit to that too.
So I had the notion, I had a very clear notion in my head, without, as I said, necessarily having a background in dungeoneering and so forth, that if you break a dungeon down to its most basic, simple parts, it's a series of structured challenges which might interplay with each other, and you follow various paths to work through it. Um, and and having run Mercboria a few times, and which have some fantastic little adventures in sort of pamphlet form. Um, I I was quite I have been I am a terse writer. I don't I write in very succinct way. And with Desanction, for example, most of the adventures for Desanction are a couple of thousand words, 3,000 at most. I did a whole book called Desanctioned Adventures, which is like six adventures, all of them like 3,000 words long, which isn't much. I mean, in the right in the right font, you can stick 2,000 words on a piece of A4 paper. So most adventures for Desanction were like 8 pages, 8 pages long. And so I wanted to have a similar approach here, but I was also conscious of the fact that that with any investigation, um, and Nordic Noir at heart is a police procedural. These are all kind of gritty, grim whodunits, really, where you go through some quite. It's about the about the agony of the investigator as much as anything. So it's it is that they uncover clues, and they gather these little scraps of evidence, but more often than not, as with any great mystery, you are left to the last few dozen pages with no clue really who's behind it. And so I wanted to find a way to have that kind of almost point-to-point structure of adventures, which could be fairly easily written with a notion of investigation bedded in them. So, and at the same time, carry that Mork Borg sort of approach. So you've got, that game is about these sort of desperate adventurers who are seeking to make what they can of this doom-laden world, which is foretold to end in the prophecies. And in the meantime, they engage in these activities out of as much as out of self-preservation as they're discovering treasures. Um, and notionally, Nordic Noir it just felt like it wasn't too far a step away. You have that same situation. You have damaged people who have like a glimmer of hope in their lives, who have dangerous jobs, put themselves in difficult situations with violent and brutal people. And they are, they too are seeking these little treasures to guide them onwards and to give purpose to their lives in this desolate landscape. And so the clue chain notionally is just it is a way of breaking down each part of an adventure, giving you a site, a situation, or a suspect, the three S's, from whom you effectively engage in a, a conflict from which you can draw potential treasure in the form of evidence, which will lead you to other situations. But at the same time, by engaging in these situations, you put yourself in harm's way. And in Nordic Noir, harm's way can be it's not a matter of getting a sword in the gut, but it quite possibly is a matter of having um, you know um, traumas that's cut through your life. Your ex-wife isn't talking to you anymore. Your daughter has gone off to university and doesn't visit anymore. You have a really bad day, and you eat far too late, and you wake up the next morning feeling really ill, and you spend a day off from investigating because you can barely leave the toilet. It's all exciting stuff, but the notion there is that the clue chain is a way of basically presenting the bits of information that make up an investigation that lead you through to either success or failure. And there is the notion that um, essentially each adventure is defined by the number of pins that you kind of need to get into the cork board with valid evidence before you before effectively the criminal kind of gets away with it.
Interesting.
If you spend too long and gather too many pieces of effectively like false evidence, false positives, red herrings, or just bad info, this crime will get away from you. The criminal will get away with it. You will not get them. Um, and it's another, cross on your record. You can't succeed every time. And yeah, so it's of all. of all the bits of the game, it's the bit that I need to finesse in my description. And clearly, the way I'm talking to you here, I haven't quite finessed it. But it is that notion almost of, it's not a game about fights in a dungeon, but it has kind of the same challenges. It is, you are faced by dangers and conflicts in your day-to-day job in pursuit of treasures that will allow you to advance towards a final goal. Um, so yeah, that's the notion of the clue chain.
Well, it sounds really interesting. I think the first thing that kind of like popped into my mind was this idea of like a linear progression, and it's sort of like a dirty word in RPGs to, the railroad.
Hmm.
How would you um is it a linear experience, or is it more of like a open sort of experience in terms of getting from one pin to the next?
So it is open to the extent that you can, as the person running the game, uh, I refer to that person as the game moderator, GM, whatever. As the GM, you have the option to either come up with an idea beforehand. You could come up with a complete investigation, or you come up with the broad idea for one, maybe, and you could potentially kind of almost generate a an investigation from scratch. There will be, like Mork Borg, there will be lots of tables to roll on, and the notion being that each location you go to has potential to generate have one or more clues that you might find. Um, you will not find them all at once. And a thing that definitely needs to be communicated here is that, unlike, say, a game like Mork Borg, where you are working in short periods of time, you've got fights that take place over a minute or whatever, seconds, maybe even before your character is struck down due to them only having one hit point. The 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 timing in Kirkbird is definitely longer than that. You go to a location and you might spend the morning there or a day there trying to find stuff out. Because if there's one thing that Nordic noir does, is it has crimes that go on for ever. I one of the first books I read, which was a Martin Beck book called Rosanna, which was, I think, pretty much the birthplace of Nordic noir.
Okay.
So Martin Beck takes place in like the 60s, which is when it was being written, by the co-authors. Um, that investigation, it's sketchy in my brain. I think it runs over a year and a half. It does not progress quickly. Whereas, like the last book I read, The Fifth Woman, which is a Wallander Nordic noir, that
Hmm.
takes place over like a month, maybe a month and a half.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about here. That's an
Right.
investigation. This is not go into a dungeon, hit things, come out on the same day. This is each scene, each thing that happens potentially might take you a day, or more. If you need to travel from, the southern edge of Sweden up to some other location to talk to a potential witness, that's going to take time. And you are finding this information out, trying to piece the clues together and uncover the evidence, but it takes time and it takes effort. And in the meantime, not only are you facing the challenge of finding that information, you have your lives to deal with,
Right.
these broken lives of, broken relationships, difficult times at work, paperwork piling up on your desk, all that traffic work that you were supposed to be doing because of all those stolen cars, that's sitting there waiting for you when you come back at the end of the day from going to, you know, Oslo or something, and you come back to your office and you sit down at 8, 9 o'clock in the evening and you stare at the pile of paperwork on your table and you realize, what are you going to do? Are you going to make a small dent in that paperwork? Are you going to go to sleep?
Mm,
No, you'll probably spend time doing the paperwork. But
right.
the idea is, yeah, the adventures take a bit longer, but at the same time, the notion is you can still run one of these games in 3 or 4 hours. Maybe you can do a one-shot adventure. It's a three-pin adventure, which is relatively short. You only have to get a certain amount of evidence to be able to secure your conviction and work out who the person behind it is. But at the same time, you could have longer adventures up to like 7, 8, 9 pins where there's lots of evidence to gather, but also the potential of lots of false leads and things going wrong, which will take days or many days of game, many sessions of gaming, and allow you to recreate some of these more complex crimes because that's definitely another aspect of Nordic noir. They are quite convoluted in terms of the actual progression, and that's I think it allows the stories to draw as much upon the lives and personalities and experiences of the investigators, understanding them as people rather than just focusing on the crime. If you're just looking at like an Agatha Christie or a Hercule Poirot mystery, you learn very little about the
Mm,
investigator.
hmm.
Yeah, it's about the who done it. Whereas
Right.
Nordic noir is quite it's it has a kind of not it's unsettling the world. It's definitely an aspect of you have no reason to like the investigator. Maybe
Right.
you pity him or her
Yeah.
because of the lives they lead, and they do a good job at the end of the day. But those lives are pretty grim.
I think one of my favorites that I read was Juicy Alder Olson, his Department Q series.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
That was super good, and I think it really underpins what you're saying in terms of these really flawed characters that, aren't necessarily the most likable people and kind of have their own baggage that they're kind of, bringing along, and but yet there's this sort of like nobility in them, of this sense of like, that they need to bring justice to, or at least, some sense of closure to whatever's happening. So is that where the baggage mechanic side of this comes in?
yes, yes. So the baggage is the personal life stuff. It's the way you are. There is perhaps a tiny influence here from Cthulhu Hack, the notion of, the path of your investigation begins to intertwine with your own life. And that's very much the case of when you if you go to a site or are engaged in a situation where you are trying to uncover evidence, a clue that would take you forward, there is the prospect that you will potentially experience a slip in your general stability and whether it's the fatigue of long days or the challenge of ill health or just a sort of the fact that you've called, you keep calling somebody and they're not answering your calls, but your
Mm,
stability begins to decline. Stability notionally is a little bit like hit points, and baggage is a more sort of visceral, like a critical, almost like a critical. These are when you finally do get that call that your your father's in hospital,
right.
or your daughter has just been sent home from school after a fight where she's gouged somebody's eye or whatever. Whatever the facet of it might be.
Right.
These are the things that weigh you down as an investigator and make it harder for you to deal with the situation. And potentially, unfortunately, the road then leads to things like the equivalent of the healing potion might well be that half bottle of scotch that's in the
Mm,
bottom drawer of your office, or you know, going for a takeaway meal at 2 o'clock in the morning when you have to be in the office at 5, and this is not
right.
the time for it. It is the way baggage is that it's what's going to kill you in the end. It
Mm,
it is almost like in the notion of hit points you have reached zero, and you are now just taking critical hits. And if you reach the point where you get to six baggage, um, you are finally driven to the point where you're going to have to do a bit of an epilogue for your character because
Interesting.
they finally slipped, and we won't see them again. And again, this if you just read a few of the Nordic noir books, they are littered with members of the teams around these investigators who have, yeah, they clearly have reached the threshold of their baggage, and they
Right.
have had their final moment and slipped out of view. So yeah, that's the notion of what baggage is.
Really interesting. One of the things that really struck me, like reading about this and, through this conversation, is the idea that this would be a really good game for solo play. Was that, I know you're going to have it as it's a stretch goal.
It is a stretch goal. Yeah,
Unfortunately, it looks like it's at a really high level, which I hope we make it there.
I do too.
But was that something that was part of your intention when you were putting this together, that this was meant more as a solo game? Or did you just see that as like an added bonus? Because it feels like solo play has really like come into its own in like this period of time in our hobby.
It it wasn't at the heart of what I was thinking. It definitely felt like an added bonus. Up to this point in time, I have done a little bit of solo game in my time. I have. It is not something that I do a lot myself, but you're right. It has increasingly become an aspect of many games to give you, whether it's solo gaming or it's one-on-one, which
Hmm.
is, they're quite close to each other. Um, Solo gaming obviously just needs that little addition of a driving force to actually, provide the color in the next step. And the reason it is so high, it's a stretch goal, is it does involve a bit more work to actually
Right,
provide the additional support, I think. Um, uh, so um, I definitely see. I think most investigation games definitely have that potential. I think more so than games which focus on conflict.
right,
That investigation games have the greater potential because you're not constantly expecting to open the next door and find that your character's been, wiped out. In a game that's about conflict, you need to actually engineer it so that there's a good reason how you can survive that next encounter. And it's a lot easier to see it as in an investigative game. You read any of these Nordic noirs, or indeed any sort of similar crime related books or whodunits. There are people will take a knock, but their demise is not driven by those fights. Yeah, there might
right.
be an occasional stray bullet, but you'll spend some time in hospital and you'll come through.
Yeah.
Whereas with a solo game, you do, yeah, as I said, with conflicts, you then have to start thinking about like companions or
Mm.
an almost a Dark Souls-esque type approach where, there's an explanation why you can keep coming at it again and again, or, weather the storm of a difficult combat. And I think it's easier to think of one-on-one. And so I would really like to do the solo. And to be clear, if we don't make it as a stretch goal, it'll arrive eventually, but
Mm.
it's a piece of work that I have to factor into an already busy creative brain.
Yeah, for sure.
Where and by supporting the Kickstarter and pushing it to that high level, and to be clear, beyond that, and having mentioned Department Q, there is a level beyond solo play, which is Clyte Board, which is basically the Scottish version.
Yes.
There was some interest. There were people keen on the idea, and it's clearly, given the fact that the Keeper of Lost Causes, on which Department Q is based, the original book, The Keeper of Lost Causes,
Yep.
is it's Danish.
Right.
That transition of Department Q, as is it on Netflix or something? Anyway, I can't remember which. I think it's
I think
Netflix.
it did go onto Netflix, yeah.
Yeah. Wherever it's streaming, yeah, they have transitioned the events of the story to Glasgow.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I was like, that's an interesting the fact that you had Scotland so high. I was like, that's interesting as like a Nordic noir. I wouldn't expect Scotland to have been one of the places, but that makes sense now that you say that.
That I think there's a sufficient there are quite a lot of police procedural books, none of which come leap to mind, but I have read a lot of those recently, which are based in Scotland as well. And I think it's the nature of the it might be like an environmental thing. Obviously, we're all far north, almost on a line with the Scandinavian sort of belt. Maybe Scotland, environmentally, it's got, it has got urban sort of settings, but it's dominated by this potentially harsh landscape, with cold and rain and so forth. Maybe I don't know what the connection necessarily is, but it works really well when they do. I think Department Q is, yeah, it shows that it's really effective.
This has been a really awesome conversation. I'm so glad. There's so much that you've brought up here that I would love to dive deeper on, and maybe we could talk about it on another episode.
Hmm.
Especially paranoia. Paranoia has been one of those things that I've really wanted to like get a deeper dive into and really I've always found it fascinating, but I don't really know much about it. But the
Hmm.
more I hear about it, I'm like, oh, I need to do a deep dive on paranoia. You sound like the perfect person to talk to about that. But before I let you go, I just wanted to do a couple of quick fire questions, and then we can wrap up.
Okay.
Evidence markers. You talk about, I saw a little clip on YouTube about evidence markers. Is that something that you actually use during the game? Like, how does that, or was that just something fun? And because it's a stretch goal, isn't it? Also,
Yes. So the evidence markers, when you have established, when you go to a location, so you've gone to a site or a suspect, you can. There's always something about games where you have a bit of bling on the table, something to focus on. The evidence markers allow you to identify the difficulty rating of that location by putting an evidence marker
oh,
down next to the name of the location. So you'll know if you've gone to the cabin in the woods that the DR for that location when you last went there was 14. So you put down a evidence marker which has the number 14 on it next to the cabin in the woods, and you'll know if you go back there again that the DR is still 14 when you go back to it. So the notion is that the evidence markers will run from 8 through to 18 or whatever. And if you're running it at a con or with friends face to face, you can put an evidence marker down. You are going to create a horizontal corkboard on the table of being able to put down this location or this suspect, and you can put evidence markers next to them to indicate the difficulty rating associated with that.
that is super smart. I love that. That actually brings me to the next one is, do you actually have or require a cork board to run this? Because I love the idea of like having the cork board set up and then putting pins and pictures and or is that just more of like a
Again, yeah, if you can do it, do it. Absolutely. As I said, I think notionally, if I go run into a convention, I think it highly unlikely I'm going to be able to carry around a cookbook to do it. It would be great if I could. But I think, the idea is that you can have a horizontal one on the table where you can put down your handouts, your pictures, your names of, locations, maps, and evidence markers. So you can put down what's where, and you maybe even bring some string along to show which bit has led to which other bit, and you can get it on the table. But if you are really well prepared and you want to, and maybe actually for online play it's more practical that you can have a virtual cork board, which can build up over the course of the game, showing where you've been, who you've spoken to, where you've gone.
that's actually a super cool idea. One of my friends uses a Miro board for his
Mm,
games when we play online,
yes.
and I could
Yeah.
see how that would be like perfect for running this style of game exactly like that. Especially when you could put the evidence markers for the things, and that's
Yeah.
brilliant, man. That is absolutely brilliant. Okay, last, uh, you don't require the core Morkborg rules, right? Everything you need is going to be in the book.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, Mork Borg, in practice, the rules fit on the end papers of the book. They are obviously spread out. So you won't need it. I mean, I advise you to buy it 'cause it's a lovely book.
Hmm. For sure. I
But
agree.
yeah, the rules themselves will be in Kirkwood.
Yeah, so this episode's going to be coming out on August 25th. So, and the Kickstarter ends September 11th. So you
Hmm.
still have about 2.5 weeks as from the airing of this episode to go to the Kickstarter, back it so that we can get Scotland and we can get Solo added to the book, as well as there's a bunch of lots of other cool stretch goals that you had added, more tables and all sorts of interesting things like that.
Yep.
The link is going to be in my in the oh, I don't even want to say the doobly doo. I just said it. Son of a bee. It's going to be in the show notes section. Don't go to the doobly doo. We don't do
No,
that here.
no.
No shame if you guys are a doobly doo person, but I just it sounds like I just don't like it. Also, I'm gonna have the link to Just Crunch's YouTube channel, the drive-through page, RPG, and obviously the official website. Was there anything else, anywhere else people can reach you or get in touch with you that you would like people to know?
Yeah, so I'm on Blue Sky. Yeah, as Paul Baldowski. Instagram has just crunch. Justcrunch.com is the sort of main site. And yeah, as I said, yeah, YouTube and is probably the other place to go. I have had fun recording some various little videos about elements of the game up to now. And so it's a good place to go and hear me mispronounce the name of my own game on multiple occasions.
Was there anything that you wanted to mention that I forgot to mention?
I almost definitely won't think of that until at least an hour after we finish speaking. But no, otherwise, yeah, definitely look at the doobly doo.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on and talking and telling us about this fabulous project. And, you know, I just, there, like I said, you have so much really cool stuff that you've been involved in or done. And I could talk to you about this for hours. And maybe we'll have you on again and we can talk about some more stuff. Um, especially like Paranoia, like I said, I'm super interested in that. But it's been fabulous having you on. I really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us and tell us all about this.
It's been great talking to you, Jason. I would love to come back and waffle about other things. So yeah, I really great talking to you.
Nice. Thanks, man. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And till next time, plungers up, everybody.